Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Navigating Homesickness webinar. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to use the chat box to let us know that the volume is working correctly. Just going to click yes if it's working. Awesome. It looks like everything is working okay. So we are going to kick it off by doing some brief introduction. Awesome. To let you know who is in the room today and who you're going to be hearing from. So I'm going to let Dr. John Ward kick it off.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Ward, and I am the director of Miami University Student Counseling Service. I've been with Miami University for about 16 years now and have quite a bit of experience in terms of working with students who've dealt with homesick issues.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kylene Ammerman, and I am an Assistant Director of Residence Life. I've been at Miami for starting my 4th year now and help kind of work with the students who are in our halls and navigating their new home.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Harrison. I am one of the Assistant Directors in the Student Activities and Fraternity and Sorority Life office here on campus, and my primary role is to make sure that your students are getting engaged. So I oversee our programming board. I work with a lot of the orientation programs that your students will have attended, homecoming, family weekend, all that good stuff.
So what we want to spend our time doing is, first of all, talking about some of the signs and symptoms of homesickness, and then we'll do a direct shift and spend some time talking about how we can engage the students that are on campus. So I want to start off with a brief primer, if you will, on Homesickness 101. So some of the basic things that you want to understand about a student that might be experiencing any level of homesickness. The first point that I want to make is that when students are feeling homesick, that is not necessarily an indication that the student has done something wrong or that families have done something wrong, or that there's anything inherently wrong with the transition process. A theme that you're going to hear us talking about over and over again is that most experiences of homesickness are very normative for the college student. So anytime when we think about a situation where someone is adjusting to a new environment, starting a new routine, it's not uncommon for that to be accompanied by some sense of anxiety, angst, and just uneasiness about what that newness is going to bring for the student. So homesickness in and of itself does not mean that there is a problem. Another thing that we oftentimes run into is the idea that students who are feeling homesick have this impression that they are in fact the only one that is experiencing the homesickness. And we have come to understand that happens for several different reasons. Primarily, that is going to happen because once a student starts to feel homesick, they tend to withdraw somewhat or at times isolate themselves, if you will. So if you can imagine the student that starts to feel homesick, a little concerned about how they're connecting with others, they withdraw, say, to their residence hall room. They don't happen to see the other student that's down on the other end of the hallway that's in their room feeling homesick. And so they get this impression that they are the only one. So it's important for those who are trying to support individuals to help normalize this experience of homesickness. We always want the individual who is feeling homesick to try and open up to others and to look for ways to connect. And we'll spend more time talking about how you encourage them to open up and ways to connect with others in some of our upcoming slides. The other thing that we want to mention at the outset is that homesickness can really occur at any time throughout the first year of college, if you will. So just because your student has not experienced homesickness in the first few weeks that we've had here doesn't necessarily mean that that student is out of the woods, if you will, in terms of this experience. it's not uncommon for students to return from, say, the Thanksgiving break, or for students to return from the winter recess after having several weeks of being home and being in that nice, comfortable environment with everything that was familiar to them, and then they actually return to campus. And at that point, after feeling fine for a good period of time, then they experience the anxieties and the distress that can be related to homesickness at that point in time. I say that not to concern anyone, not to worry anyone, but just again as a point that if it happens in a delayed fashion, that you're able to normalize that for your students and let them know that, again, they are likely not the only ones at that point throughout the course of the academic year that is feeling homesick. So again, on this theme of homesickness being normal, each year we actually ask all of our new students a series of questions about their transition in our annual transition survey. So your student will be asked to complete this survey in just a few weeks, and there's several stats from last year's responses that I think are useful to this current conversation that we're having. So as we're looking at this together, note that 42% of students have indicated that they experienced homesickness by week 7 or 8. And another 42% have experienced loneliness. But here's the but. 86 had made some friends, and 87% felt that they would be successful at Miami. So again, this is just helping to drive home the point that feeling lonely, feeling homesick are a normative experience for students, but most students are still going to go on to have a very successful, connected, adjusted time here at Miami. Thinking about some of the common signs of homesickness. And also I just want to throw in here, we have to remember that feeling comfortable and connected in any type of environment is going to take time. You think about any time that you may have moved a neighborhood or start a new job, even for us adults, if you will, it takes time for us to feel comfortable in our new routine. And so students are going to be experiencing that same adjustment time. And the experience of homesickness is going to manifest differently for every single student. Here we're noticing several different symptoms, if you will, of homesickness that students might show or display. Anywhere from the excessive crying to, say, texting home all the time, describing the lack of their social connections, describing experiences of anxiety, especially if that's not something that's normal for that student. At times they may miss or skip some of their classes because of the mood that they're experiencing. They might avoid some of the responsibilities that they need to be taking on in this environment. We have some students that are frequently coming home or asking to come home or leaving campus to go some other place that they might feel connected. And then this general sense of social withdrawal of students, and that's where the loneliness might come in for students, where it could be a reciprocal or a circular thing. They start to withdraw, they feel a little more lonely, there's more difficulty connecting with other students, and then there's just a cycle that the students may get into. So these are some of the common signs. There's other signs that might be displayed depending on the student that we don't have listed here. But again, this experience is normal. So oftentimes, individuals start to think, okay, I'm noticing that my student is homesick. I have a sense of what some of these signs are. I know it's normal, but when am I supposed to get help? When is it more than something that is just normative? I have a few thoughts about that. The first being that when the symptoms are consistent, and when I say consistent, I mean that the symptoms are not diminishing in in intensity, such as you drop a student off on move-in day and they're full of tears and they're very emotional at that point in time, anxious, fearful, and then it's 4 weeks later and they still have that same exact intensity level, all right? It hasn't diminished at all. If it's starting to get better day by day or week by week, it's not necessarily a concern. When a student is explaining or relaying that the symptoms are occurring most every single day, or that those symptoms are lasting for a majority of the day, that's the point at which we might think about engaging additional help. Now, families and parents have been helpers for much of the student's life, but at this point, if you feel as if, wow, you've met your level in terms of what you're able to deal with for the student, that might be the point at which you're referring for additional or professional help or support, if you will. Or if the ideas that you've tried or the encouragement that you've given hasn't been of any help to the student, you might think about that's the time where you bump it up a notch and say, maybe I want to get the student connected with a professional to talk about this transition. And there are times where the student will outright ask for some professional help or support to deal with the homesickness and the accompanying symptoms of distress that they might be feeling. At that point, you don't have to wait weeks. Just go ahead and see what you can do to help get the student connected. I understand that I just talked about when to get help, and we will most definitely get to some avenues of help in just a few more minutes here.
As John said, Kylene, John, and I are going to be talking a little bit about resources that are specific to Miami University. So in the following slides, we're going to talk about building a community in the residence halls. We're going to talk about getting involved on campus and health and wellness resources. And what we ask is that you use these resources as a way to connect to your students here on campus. So when they reach out to you, be advocates of their experience by showing them that these resources are available to them.
So as John said earlier, not just one student experiences homesickness. So residence life, knowing that this is a common occurrence that may be happening, we try to do some preemptive measures to have students start creating community right when they get on campus. So this year we did something brand new, which was really exciting, is that we actually had events on opening weekend on the quads for students. So the night started with a corridor event. So they gathered as a corridor to kind of do some icebreakers and to get to know you games. So that way they're making a connection with people who are their neighbors. After that, they moved into the larger building. They got to mix up and meet people on different floors. So they know their neighbors right on their same floor, but also they know everyone else kind of in the building. They're making different types of connections. Then they were able to travel to different events across our campus. So you'll see the picture on the bottom right is a foam party. Yeah, it was fantastic, very foamy. You may be cringing at it, but students had a great time and they made friends. We also did different arts and crafts. We had recess games, we had a movie night, we had tie-dyeing and Ninja Warrior Run, and so we had lots of different activities that students could travel to, hopefully with their new friends that they made during these corridor and all-hall events. We also have additional corridor meetings that happen at the beginning of the school year, so that way they can get to know the RA and get to know more people, kind of creating another connection that maybe they had a brief one at the first opening weekend event on Saturday night, then they're going to have another chance to have that connection again with someone who may be more down their hall. Additionally, for residence life, we have our pillars that we focus on that really try to help combat homesickness and help create a community where they're living. And so looking at our pillars, we have our pillars of creating a healthy home, thinking about their academics, so persistence and retention, also kind of extending the classroom to bring the faculty into the halls, and thinking about promoting diverse and inclusive communities, and also transition to adulthood. So we do that through a variety of ways. And one way is our one-on-ones that we have. So RAs right now are completing one-on-ones with the students in their corridors. They should meet with all of their residents by the end of this month. So if your student hasn't talked to you about this yet, there's still time that the RAs are completing this. And so this is a chance for the RA to check in and say, how are you feeling on campus? You know, have you made some connections with others? How's your roommate relationship going? What student organizations have you thought about? And so if a resident is saying, I haven't made those connections, an RA in that one-on-one setting is going to be able to connect them to different resources. Additionally, our professional staff, so these are master level live-in professionals or graduate students who are obtaining their master's, they're going to be also holding one-on-ones with your students. This is going to happen throughout the entire semester, actually the entire academic year. They're going to be having one-on-ones, reaching out to those students, so that way they can also do that follow-up and do that check-in, especially as John talked about that there could be a delayed onset of homesickness. This is a great chance for our professionals to kind of dive deep into some of those questions and those connections. We also have student leadership right inside the halls. So maybe joining a student organization could be kind of daunting, or they're not kind of worried about taking that first step. They just have to walk right outside their door and they can be involved in student leadership. Every single community has what is known as a community leadership team, or a CLT. And what a CLT does is that they do programming for the halls, they do advocacy for their halls. They are the student government for that individual building, which is really exciting, and they get to meet more residents and kind of it's a great way for them to dip their toes into student leadership, because it's a pretty flat structure where they can kind of think of what are some of my strengths and how can I use those to make a great community. And that feeds into the RHA, which is the Residence Hall Association, which is the student government for all of the residence halls. So it's a great way to meet leaders within their buildings, but also across campus who are residential students. Additionally, we do programming in the halls. So that touches on some of the pillars that we use. And so the RAs are doing programming, the CLTs are doing programming. We're finding ways to have those social programs and those academic programs. And if your student is in a living learning community, we're also bringing some stakeholders and connecting them with their living learning community or their LLC. And so that's the way that they connect with others that have a shared interest. So we try to kind of look at it at a lot of different angles when it comes to creating community in the halls. And so that way students can really create a new community and try to make the wonderful residence halls become their home.
So it's been just a little under 1 month since you may have dropped your first year student off to live on campus. And so I wanted to just do a quick refresher of all the things that your students may have experienced in the first 4 weeks of the semester. As Kylene touched on, they were pretty engaged in their residence halls on that Saturday evening of move-in weekend. But if your student arrived as early as Wednesday for an early move-in for a residence hall or a leadership program, we were doing events from Wednesday until the end of the semester. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the orientation programming that was available to your student and how that is indicative of what is going on the rest of the semester. So they may have attended something on Wednesday night if they were here for a leadership program or moved in early. On Thursday evening, they spent the evening at the rec center, so getting to know the Dog and Ice Center, getting to know the rec center, opportunities there, and spending some time in that quad. And then on Friday evening, they got a taste of Late Night Miami. So I'll talk a little bit about Late Night Miami in conjunction with Miami activities and programming, but they were essentially running around campus doing whatever you could possibly dream of. There was roller skating, there was succulent planting at the Crawford's backyard, there was dodgeball, and then it all concluded with a fireworks show, which you can see a picture of in the bottom right of the screen. That is from this year's fireworks show. And then once the weekend wrapped up, they were going full speed ahead. So our first large event to get students involved is Mega Fair. You may have heard from your student that we had a pretty soggy Mega Fair this year. We did a couple of rain dates and it didn't quite work out. But I wanted to talk to you about what the alternative was for Mega Fair for your student. And so for those of you unfamiliar with the program, Mega Fair is where about 450 student organizations, university departments, and community members are looking for your students to get involved. So student organizations, like I always use the Underwater Basket Weaving Club as an example, are looking for students to join their organization specifically. And so because our large Mega Fair range out, what we did was we did a week of involvement. So Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday of last week were mini Mega Fairs. So I'd say mini large Mega Fairs. And so your student was able to stop by the Armstrong Student Center in the nice air conditioning and completely dry and visit organizations looking for new members. So they were able to see organizations grouped by category. So if your student came to college really wanting to join a service organization, there was a day where service organizations were specifically showcased. And so if they were not able to attend the mini Mega Fairs, I'll talk a little bit in another slide about their other opportunities for getting involved. They also went through homecoming their first weekend of the semester. It was incredibly early this year, but it was still a lot of fun. So your student had the opportunity to watch a movie on the lawn of Yeager Stadium on the night before homecoming, and then they were able to tailgate before the game and then head into the game for homecoming weekend. And then alumni even hosted Sunday Fun Day. So if they were here for the long weekend, there was stuff stretching through the whole long weekend. And then I talked a little bit about Late Night Miami programming, but I also wanted to talk about Miami activities and programming. So your student was encouraged to follow them on social media over the first couple of days of the semester. And Miami Activities and Programming is a student-led programming group here on campus, and I advise them, and they are students who plan for students, right? So it's not the Office of Student Activities trying to figure out what your 18, 19-year-old student wants to do on a Friday night, but it is other students saying, wouldn't it be really cool if the student said a couple weeks ago, wouldn't it be really cool if Joey from Full House could come on campus? So we hosted Dave Coulier, who is Joey from Full House, on Tuesday evening, and about 500 plus students showed up to that event. So they're hosting events like that that are free for your students to attend all year. That is one comedian in the long string of comedians that they are bringing for the semester, and we'll talk about that a little later. But if your student is not already clued into what Miami Activities and Programming is doing, I strongly suggest that they look into that. It is a great way to build community. It is a great way to grab a friend that they have and try something new on campus. And so I mentioned if they weren't able to attend one of the mega fairs that were happening last week, we have a program called the SEAL Ambassadors. And you may have heard this over the summer or during orientation, but our SEAL Ambassadors are peer mentors who are here to help your students get involved. So like many of the things the students do on campus, it's nice to connect with another student. Sometimes it can be overwhelming to walk into a staff member's office and say, I'm just not finding my place. But for this program, it's nice to connect with another student who knows the ins and outs of what it looks like to be involved on campus, how to start an organization if they're not quite finding one that they want to, or how to explore interests that they might not know that they even have at this point. So our SEAL Ambassadors hold office hours in the Armstrong Student Center. You may have remembered that from orientation, but the Armstrong Student Center is located in the center of campus, and it was where you attended orientation sessions up in the pavilion. Our office is on the second floor of that building, and they host office hours. You can see this on the left-hand side of the screen. This is when they were in the office, and then their contact information is here as well. They can also walk into our office at any time in 2026 Armstrong Student Center and ask to schedule a meeting with a SEAL Ambassador. So if they weren't quite finding what they were looking for at Mega Fair, or they have a group of people who really want to start the Underwater Basket Weaving Club, you can send them to the SEAL Ambassadors in the Armstrong Student Center. I also wanted to look ahead just a little bit to let you know that although your student might have gotten settled, they might have gotten into the groove, they might think that things might be slowing down a little bit, it doesn't. So there is still plenty of things to be happening on campus, plenty of things to engage your student on. For those of you that are coming next week into Family Weekend, we're really looking forward to seeing you. If you're not able to make it to Family Weekend, that doesn't mean you can't give your student a really awesome weekend. So you're still able to buy them tickets. Send your student and their closest friend to the comedian as something of like, sorry, I can't make it, but here's a great weekend. You can buy them tickets to a comedian and brunch the next morning, and that is a full weekend full of events. Those ticket links are available on the Family Weekend website. And then additionally, I mentioned the comedy series that MAP provides on campus. These 3 comedians are free and open to all students. We're really excited for Cecily Strong to be here in October. Along with the comedy series, MAP also provides a coffee house series. So if your student is looking to change up, they don't like studying in their residence hall, they've been to the library every day this week, grab their book, come to Armstrong Shades and listen to a coffee house, some live music. And then enjoy Oxford. Your students are part of a greater community whether or not they know it or not. So Oxford has a million things going on in town. And I wanted to highlight a few things that our students are particularly excited about each year. The Thursday night concert series goes through the end of September, so they only have a couple more left. There's one tonight. There's a student band who's performing in the Uptown Parks that is free and open to students. The next Thursday is the last Thursday night concert of the season, and that'll be all of our a cappella groups. And then that will conclude with an event with President and Dr. Crawford. So if they're wanting to go to an event with the Crawfords, that is a good opportunity for them. And then Holiday Fest is an event that's been happening for the past 2 or 3 years, and our students are always super jazzed for this event. The town of Oxford turns into this magical, wonderful, like winter wonderland in December, and Holiday Fest is the Saturday before finals start, and it is an opportunity for your students to come up, go ice skating, drink hot chocolate, hop into a carriage ride with reindeer. It's really incredible. And so I put the link to the events calendar on there, but you can also find that by just Googling Enjoy Oxford, and their website has an events calendar on there. So that's a good way for your students to say, you know what, I don't really feel like going into Armstrong today. That's fine. Go uptown and see what's happening within the greater community.
So Tiffany and I chatted about lots of different activities and ways that your students can get connected. So I think this is a good time to kind of stop and think about how you are a resource, right? So what can you do to help your student going through this? So as kind of a refresher, kind of what John talked about earlier is listen, right? Listen about their experiences and empathize and normalize that process, right? But what's important is don't solve their problems for them, right? This is a time to really listen to see what's going on with them. Then you can ask questions. So how are the people in your hall? How is your roommate? Have you, made connections with the you in your corridor? How is your RA? Have you talked to your RA? What organizations are you involved in? Did you attend the mega fairs? Did you ever hear about the SEAL ambassadors, right? Think about joining them. Ask about their classes. They are spending time in learning things. So how are their classmates? Do they have any group projects that they're doing? Do they, with their group project members, do they get maybe dinner beforehand or maybe coffee beforehand and then work on their project? So ask different questions. And then what's really important is empowering your student to really think about those solutions and think about different resources and empower them to seek out those resources, right? So it can be, maybe you should talk to your RA. How do you, thinking about that? And so, you can tell them to go talk to the RA, right? Empower them to make that step, to have that conversation with their RA or their resident director or their professor or the SEAL ambassador, whoever it may be, and then follow up with them, right? So give them some time. It's not going to happen in the same day because your student has a busy life and they have a lot going on. So follow up with them, right? Check in with them. So I think that those are great ways kind of reflecting on what we learned about homesickness, kind of what Residence Life offers, the different activities happening to really kind of think about that, digest that, and listen to your students, ask questions, and empower them.
And so then we come to the point whereby you have tried all of these different resources that we've mentioned, and that doesn't seem to be enough to have your students get the help, support that they need. And so at this point, we do want to start to think about what other more professional type resources might be available to your student. The first one that should be coming to mind is the student counseling service that we have on campus. The student counseling service is located in the health service building. Easy access to students from all over campus, no matter where their residence is. Most individuals think about the individual counseling or the group counseling or the workshops that we offer to students. Another really important component of what we provide at the student counseling service is consultation to faculty, staff, and families about issues that they may be dealing with a particular student. So it's not uncommon for a family member to call our office, indicate that they just want to chat briefly with one of the counselors about a specific situation that they're dealing with for a student, and to get some coaching around many of the things that we've been talking about earlier, just more specifically to their student. So I do want you to think of the student counseling service as a consultation resource to you, the family, not only as a place that the student can go for professional mental health related support. I also have listed here two different websites that provide excellent information on transition to college. The transition year, emotional health at college, and Set Go are both resources that I would encourage any family to spend a little bit of time digging into. They will really reinforce many of the messages that we spent time talking about throughout the course of this webinar, but also go a little further to talk about other aspects of emotional adjustment at college for any student that is at the institution and not feeling completely settled just yet. The next thing that I do want to mention more broadly by way of health and wellness resources is that in addition to the counseling service, we do have a medical service on campus and then an office of student wellness. The reason that I also mention these offices in addition to counseling by way of support is depending on the student, they may prefer to speak with a physician or a nurse about their concerns first, or they might want to speak with someone who's doesn't have doctor associated with their name, but they still want to talk with a professional. That might be someone from our wellness office. But please know that we are an integrated unit, such that if a student presents at the wellness office and they're discussing homesick issues, please know that if appropriate, there will be a referral made back to counseling or back to residence life if that has not been tried yet, as it is for a student. So we want to support holistically as a campus community the mental health and wellness of our students. We've now gotten to the part of the webinar where we've covered the information that we wanted to put out there initially to you all, and very much thank you for listening to our opening facts. And now we want to take a moment and jump into some of the questions that you may have. And at this point, I'm not necessarily seeing any questions that you have at this point, but I do want to remind you that this session is being recorded, and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent out to all of the participants this afternoon. So at this point, if there are not any more questions, we again thank you for your time and appreciate you being with us this afternoon.